Nobody believed in him, not when he said he was going to make it out of that neighborhood where sirens were background music and boarded-up windows were part of the scenery. Not when he stood on cracked sidewalks after long shifts, staring at the downtown skyline glowing like a promise meant for someone else. The city looked different from where he stood. Cleaner, brighter, certain. Where he stood, streetlights flickered. Rainwater collected in potholes. And his sneakers, 3 years old and worn thin, let the cold seep in every time it stormed. He felt that water more than he ever complained about it. It was a reminder of where he started. But poverty wasn't the sharpest pain. It was the look people gave him. That half-second glance that measured his clothes, his posture, his address. The look that said, "This is as far as you go." He didn't argue with them. Didn't declare he'd be rich one day. Didn't talk about proving everyone wrong. He had no audience, no applause, just long nights and early mornings. While other guys on the block blamed the economy, the mayor, their parents, bad luck, he listened. He watched. He noticed patterns. He didn't know it yet, but that habit would become his advantage. He grew up in a 2-room house that shook when freight trains passed 3 streets over. In summer, the air inside felt thick enough to chew. In winter, cold crept through the walls like it had a key. His father worked whatever jobs he could find. Roofing in July heat, clearing debris after storms, sometimes factory shifts when the plant needed extra hands. His mother cleaned houses across town, big houses with tall ceilings and marble floors. She left before sunrise, riding 2 buses to get there. Money didn't stretch. It snapped. Groceries were calculated down to the dollar. If the electricity bill ran high, something else had to shrink. There were nights when dinner was simple by necessity, not choice. He learned early how to act like things were normal. At school, he sat near the back. He wasn't loud, wasn't disruptive, just quiet. When teachers asked about future plans, kids around him said, lawyer, doctor, pro athlete. He said nothing, not because he lacked dreams. Because saying them felt like handing someone a reason to laugh. At 16, he started applying for jobs. Grocery stores, car washes, warehouse loading docks. One manager glanced at his thrift store shirt and said they'd keep his application on file. Another told him he needed experience. A third didn't bother calling back. He watched classmates get used cars from their parents. Saw new sneakers, weekend parties, freedom. He counted coins on the kitchen table to help cover rent. One night, he woke up thirsty and heard something through the thin wall. His mother was crying, softly, trying not to wake anyone. He stood there in the dark, hand against the wall, and listened to the sound of someone carrying too much weight. Something settled inside him that night. Not anger, not rebellion, a quiet decision. He didn't know how yet. But he would change this. The years that followed tested that decision. He worked wherever he could, stocking shelves, washing dishes, loading trucks before sunrise. Some supervisors treated him like he was invisible. Others treated him like he was replaceable. He swallowed pride more times than he could count. He tried small hustles. Sold homemade snacks one summer from a folding table near a bus stop. The first month, he barely covered ingredients. The second month, rain kept customers away. He shut it down with $10 of profit and a bruised ego. Friends drifted into faster lanes. Quick cash, flashy clothes, risk that felt like confidence. They told him he was wasting time. Man, you're playing the long game in a short world. Sometimes he wondered if they were right. One night, past midnight, he sat on a curb under a broken streetlight. The city hummed in the distance. He'd just finished a double shift and his back ached like it belonged to someone twice his age. He stared at the empty street. Thought about quitting night classes. Thought about taking whatever came, no questions asked. Thought about shrinking his ambition down to survival. For a few minutes, he almost convinced himself that average was enough. Then he remembered his mother's quiet crying. And he stayed seated until the urge to quit passed. The turning point came disguised as routine. He was working delivery routes for a small local company. Long hours, low pay, constant chaos. Customers called daily, frustrated about late packages. Boxes misplaced. No updates. No accountability. Drivers shrugged it off. Traffic, they'd say. Not my problem, others muttered. Owners chased more contracts, not better service. He began noticing something. The complaints weren't random. They were predictable. Routes were poorly planned. No backup system when a vehicle broke down. No clear communication with customers. He started paying attention like a student in a free masterclass. Every mistake around him was information. At night, lying on his narrow bed, he replayed the day in his head. If I owned this, I'd fix that first. If this were my company, I'd call before they called me. If I made a promise, I'd treat it like a deadline carved in stone. He didn't have capital, didn't have investors, didn't have a business degree. But he had attention to detail. In discipline, he began tracking his own deliveries, timing routes, calculating mileage, logging delays and their causes. When coworkers laughed at him for calling customers to give 5-minute updates, he didn't argue. He was practicing. He wasn't building someone else's company. He was building himself. He spent evenings at the public library reading about logistics, small business management, cash flow basics. The terms were unfamiliar, the concepts heavy. He read slowly, took notes in a spiral notebook he carried everywhere. He learned one critical truth. Speed without structure collapses. Reliability builds slowly, but it lasts. After months of saving, sacrificing weekends and new clothes, he bought a used cargo van. Faded white, rust near the wheel wells. Engine that hesitated before turning over. It wasn't impressive, it was opportunity. He registered a small delivery service. No logo designer, no marketing team, just a phone number and his name. His first client was a small retail shop. The owner agreed to a trial contract, 30 days. He showed up 15 minutes early to every pickup. He double-checked addresses. He built routes carefully, leaving buffer time for traffic. If he promised 3 p.m., he arrived at 2:50. When he made mistakes, and he didn't hide them. He called first, apologized directly, offered solutions. It caught people off guard. They weren't used to that. Word spread quietly. Another shop signed on, then a small parts supplier. He reinvested everything. Maintenance before comfort. Emergency savings before upgrades. The van broke down on a rainy Tuesday. He felt panic hit his chest like a punch. Customers waiting. Clock ticking. For a moment, he was back on that curb years ago. Then he started making calls. Explained the situation honestly. Arranged a rental. Took the financial hit. Added a repair fund line to his budget. Every problem became a system. He hired his first employee after 2 years. A young guy from a similar neighborhood. Nervous. Hungry. He trained him personally. Call before they call you, he'd say. If you're late, own it. Respect builds contracts. Competitors undercut his prices. Some clients left. He let them go. The ones who stayed valued something else, consistency. 3 vans became 5. A rented garage became a small warehouse. Handwritten logs became structured software. He didn't chase headlines. He chased stability. Then came the email from a regional distribution company. They wanted a meeting. He walked into a glass tower downtown wearing his best suit. Not designer. Not flashy. But pressed and clean. Years ago, he'd stared at buildings like that from the sidewalk below. Now he sat across a polished table. They asked tough questions. About scalability. About contingency planning. About staff retention. About margins. He didn't exaggerate. He showed real numbers. Growth charts. Mistakes corrected. Systems implemented. He spoke calmly. Not like a man begging. Like a man prepared. When the contract approval came days later, he didn't shout. He closed his office door. Sat in silence. And remembered rain seeping into broken sneakers. Remembered counting coins. Remembered sitting on a curb, fighting the urge to quit. Expansion followed. New hires. Larger warehouse. Updated fleet. Pressure intensified. Now mistakes cost more. He moved carefully. Processes first. Training second. Growth third. He paid employees on time. Every time. He remembered what delayed paychecks felt like. He created structure where chaos once lived. One afternoon, years later, he drove back to his old neighborhood. Parked a few blocks away. Walked slowly. Kids still played in the street. The houses looked smaller than he remembered. He stood in front of the house where he grew up. Someone else lived there now. He didn't feel shame. Didn't feel superiority. He felt distance. Not physical. Emotional. He had built something that changed trajectory. Not just for him. For his parents. For his employees. For families who now relied on stable paychecks. He sat briefly on the same curb where he once almost gave up. Cars passed. No one recognized him. That was fine, because the real victory hadn't been the contract, or the warehouse, or the revenue numbers. It had been the quiet decision, years earlier, to do simple things better than everyone else. To answer the phone, to show up early, to fix mistakes instead of hiding them, to build slowly in a world addicted to shortcuts. He stood up, walked back to his car, and drove toward a future he had constructed piece by piece. Not through luck, not through noise, but through steady, deliberate choices made when nobody was watching. And that was power no one could take away.